Hi, welcome to Jay's Bass Channel, and we're just getting things kicked off with our introductory episode. And what we'll be talking about today, tonight, or whatever time it is when you're watching this video is the really basic terms about bass guitars. What are all the parts named? Because a lot of the early videos we're going to do are going to be about Fender basses. We're going to start with precisions, jazzes, and short neck, short scale basses, and also some variations of the Telecaster basses, and learn what the differences are, why you might want to get one or the other. But tonight or today we're going to just go through some basic terms of what we have here, and we have a couple of basses that we'll kind of look at. I have a 70s vintage Precision here, and I have one of the newer Player Series jazz basses that I just picked up for the channel that we can look at a little bit too, since they are a bit different. So I'm just going to go down this list I have, and I'll print the list out for you guys, or attach it so you guys can see this list. So I've got about 16 different parts of the bass that basically all have a name and a job. The first part I guess would be the body. The body is the wood part here that everything is kind of bolted onto. We have a body and a neck. That's your two kind of main parts. The main thing to think about when you're shopping for a bass and you're looking at the different woods they might give you, like alder, ash, or basswood are very common ones. Some of the most apparent differences are going to be weight. I don't know that any of those woods are definitely bad or anything, but weight is a big thing with basses. They can get very heavy, and if you get them very lightweight, they can give you what's called neck dive, which the body is not heavy enough to counteract this, and when you take your hand off the bass, you'll get a heavy neck dive, and that's usually considered not a good thing. So there are three different woods that you'll see very common in bass bodies. The second main component we have is a neck, and that is basically this piece of wood here. The neck has a lot of different components, but basically we have a piece of maple wood here that the neck has all the different parts attached to, and on the Fender basses we have a neck plate. And this is a bolt-on neck, and all of the Fender basses in general are going to be bolt-on. That's kind of throughout the Fender line of instruments. Bolt-on is kind of what they use instead of gluing necks on. You can get through body necks or glued necks, but the Fenders are going to be bolt-on necks. Then you have the neck. This is a 4-bolt neck plate you saw on the back here, and it's got 4 really big screws that go into the maple. And the next thing is the nut. The nut is this kind of whitish thing right here, and the strings go through it. So basically the nut keeps the strings from sliding to side and keeps them an even height from the top of the neck and the frets, which we'll talk about in a minute. So there's your nut, and there's basically 4 slots in the nut for these strings to sit in. And it might seem like an inconsequential thing, but a good nut is very important to your bass functioning well, staying in tune, and just playing well in general. The next thing I have on my list is the fretboard, and you can see here we have a separate fretboard from the maple part. This is an older bass with a rosewood fretboard. You can see it's a dark brown or a black. The rosewood fretboard is going to have a certain tonal characteristic that would be not as bright as, say, one that has, as you can see, this jazz bass has a maple fretboard, which is going to be a brighter sounding instrument. Almost all the basses you see are going to be available with different sorts of fretboards, and on top of the rest of the neck, which is maple. Next thing we have to talk about is the frets. The frets are basically the little pieces of metal that go across, and when you play a note, that's basically where the string touches the fret. So that's on a standard tuning bass, that's a G. So the precision bass was, from what I understand, the first bass to have frets on it. Before they didn't have frets, and you could just slide up and down them. But this way you could be precisely on a note. And so the frets are the metal wire that goes across and is set into the top, the front edge of the neck, which is the fretboard, and it's kind of cut into there. And the frets can vary in material. They can be stainless steel, they can be nickel, they can be wider, they can be taller, they can be shorter, and all of those things basically can affect how the instrument plays. And most seasoned players have certain sorts of frets that they prefer. It's not that anything is specifically always best, but there's lots of different types of frets. And another thing with the frets is there's a lot of the workmanship of the instrument is handled in the frets, because the fret edges and the way the string sits on the frets, if they're not finished off properly, they'll be cut the edges of your hands a little bit when you're playing. And also the frets can buzz because they're not finished out evenly. So frets are a very, very big deal. On lesser expensive basses, the fret work might not be done as nicely, so the notes won't ring out as well, and they're a little less comfortable to play. I'm looking over here because I have all my list of everything I want to run over here. Another thing is truss rods. On this bass is an old bass, and the truss rod is adjusted down here. You have to stick a screwdriver down here. I don't know if you can see that, but you had to stick a screwdriver in there to adjust the truss rod. And you can see with this jazz bass, you actually stick an Allen wrench in here and adjust the truss rod from this end, which is much more convenient. So what the truss rod does is keeps the neck fairly straight, so the strings are pulling against the truss rod, so the neck wants to come this way. So we don't want that to happen. We want our neck to be fairly straight so we can play the bass. So the truss rod adjusts the tension to counteract the strings. So when a bass is being set up, part of the setup is the adjustment of the truss rod. So when you buy a bass, you want to be sure you get one that's the truss rod's not broken, or it can be easily adjusted by yourself or a repair person. The next thing I have is, I think I have these down somewhere. I'm going to jump on over to these. Is the tuning machines, or the tuners. The tuners, as you can see, the strings are wrapped around these, and when you tune the bass, obviously, say if I was going to tune the bass, I have a tuner open on my Pro Tools back here, so I can now I'm out of tune. So I can look on my tuner and get it back up to E. So obviously you tighten the tuners. Okay, so basically I would, to tune the bass, you basically tighten the string to go upward, or loosen it to go down, and that's how we do it with the tuning machines. This is a very old bass, so there's a lot of play in the tuning machines on this one. And you see, yeah, this bass is very old and the tuners are worn. So these don't have replacement tuners. So tuner machines and every other part on the bass basically can be replaced. If you buy a bass and you don't like the tuners, well, you buy a nicer set. So you can see that these are very old tuners. They're a little bit bigger and a little more heavy duty than the player tuners here. And there's the back side of the tuners there, and there's the front of the tuners where they come through the neck. So the tuning machines can, as any part we're talking about, can vary in workmanship and quality. So the next the next component of the bass after that, this is very simple. These are our strap buttons, and this is where we hook our strap onto, so the bass doesn't fall off. And then we have another item we have is, of course, the strings. The strings on this one are called flat wounds. They're a little less common than what came stock on this bass, which is round wounds. The flat wounds are very smooth, and the round wounds are like piano wire. They make more noise when you slide up and down, but they have a certain sort of bite. So those are your two basic types of bass strings. Also, when you buy strings, not only can you get different finishes on the strings with the round wound, the flat wounds, and several others, also how heavy a gauge the strings are a big thing that we'll talk about in some later videos. They make different gauges, which means they're smaller, the strings are looser, and of course they feel and play much different when you use different gauges of strings. But we'll get into string gauges as far as selecting string gauges in another video. The next thing that we have on our list here is the bridge. Now this is a replacement bridge. This is an old badass bridge that most 70s basses turned out to have on them. And basically the bridge on this bass, the string goes through the bridge, so the bridge holds the string. Many basses actually load from the back, and then it comes around through there, through the bridge. Now the bridge does several things. It keeps the strings from moving side to side. It also sets the string height, how high the strings are. So when you're deciding how high your action is how high your strings are from the frets in the fretboard. You adjust that with a combination of the truss rod and then raising and lowering the saddles. These are called saddles, where the strings actually sit. You raise or lower the saddles and change your action. If your action is too low, the bass will buzz and won't fret properly. If it's too high, then it's hard to play because you have to mash the strings very hard. And the other thing it can do is we move the saddles back and forth. That adjusts intonation. Intonation basically makes the bass, when it's in tune down here, also in tune up here. So when we play high on the neck, we want it to be in tune as well as down the neck. So that's adjusted as well on the bridge. So bridges are very important. This, like I said, is an aftermarket bridge. We can see a standard Fender bridge here, and they're a little less weighty. As you can see, that is a standard Fender bridge, and thus the style bridge basically that came in all of the basses on Fenders throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Maybe not the 50s. The 50s, some of the 50s ones were a little different. But that was kind of the standard bridge. Now there's a zillion variations, but in the 70s, these badass bridges were very common. So you'll see half the 70s basses in the world seem to have gotten these bridges put on them. Now, one of the more important things in a bass or any guitar type instrument is the pickup. Now this is basically a split pickup. So they have this part of the pickup picks up these two strings, and that part picks up these two. When I say pick up, that means that the strings are going to vibrate in front, and it basically creates an electrical sound that goes, basically out of the bass. That's where the string sound is captured, is in the pickup. So basically there's magnets and such in there that when the string moves in front of the magnetic field, it basically captures the sound of the string and sends it on down to the rest of the electronics in the bass. So basically a lot of the voicing of the bass is going to be in the pickups. Strange thing about this bass is I put aftermarket pickups in it for years, and that was just a thing I seemed to do all the time a long time ago. But now, like I said, this is a 73 bass, and I actually found the original pickups and put it back in this bass, and I think it sounds way better than the aftermarket pickups. And here you'll see the jazz bass again, and we'll see the pickups are slightly different. In this case, we have two pickups. We have one near the bridge, one near the neck. So we have 2 pickups here, and these are not split pickups. These pickups, the one pickup picks up all 4 strings, and then the bottom pickup down here picks up all 4 strings as well. We'll have a show just on jazz basses soon, and we'll talk about the difference between jazz basses and precision, which are, or for people considering buying Fender basses, is a very big deal to decide which way you're going to go. And there are other things like Telecaster basses, variations on these basses, and short scale basses, and we'll try the best we can to run over all that stuff in subsequent videos. Okay, so now the next things we got going on here is what's called the pots. Now the pots are behind these knobs. These are our knobs, basically. So obviously this is our volume knob. Turns the bass's output up and down. Now the next knob is our tone knob. So listen here. That's with the tone knob up, and we turn the tone knob down. It takes the high frequencies of the treble, the high end, down. So and then turn it back up. A lot snappier sound. Again, this has got flat wounds on it, so this bass is a little unusual sounding next to something with round wounds, which are much more common. I started playing this bass a little lately, and I decided to use it for the demonstration. So back behind these knobs are the pots, which are the potentiometers, are behind this pick guard. And a pick guard is another part of Fender basses because that's where the electronics are bolted onto the pick guard, and it's basically just a piece of plastic. So you have a pick guard here. Now a lot of people will change out pick guards because they want a white pick guard or a tortoise shell, which is brownish, and this is a black pick guard. So this is all these things commonly get swapped out. This is a really old bass. I think the original pick guard actually got broken for it, and this is actually a replacement pick guard. So this bass has a replacement pick guard and a replacement bridge on it. So it's not actually an original bass. Here you see the pick guard, but you have on the back side, you have basically the pots, and on the front of then the knobs go over on the shaft of the pots, and that basically does the deed of turning the bass up and down, or turning the treble down, or up. Basically, when it's up, that's the natural sound of the bass. When you turn the volume all the way up and the tone all the way up, that's your natural sound of the bass. And what happens is you can turn down the volume, or you can decrease the highs that are coming off the pickup. And probably the last thing I was going to talk about is the actual finish on the bass. Now, you think about a finish as just being a color, but the finishes can be, vary quite a bit, and the quality and the desirability of the basses can change with that. The old basses had nitrocellulose finishes on them, and the more expensive basses have more expensive finishes that end up weathering better, and there's something about the feel of them that's better. But the lesser expensive have polyurethane finishes on it. This was refinished actually, but it was refinished with car paint, so this is very similar to the original finish. But these lesser expensive Player Series basses, these are polyurethane finishes, which are considered a little less desirable, but these are less expensive instruments, and one of the things that they do with these to save money so they can give you a good bass for not a lot of money is to put the polyurethane finishes. And there are other finishes too, And sometimes people just have oil rubbed into them and such like that. So the finishes can vary. So I think we talked about body, necks, this is a bolt-on neck, neck plate, the nut, fretboard, the frets, truss rod, strap button, strings, tuning machine, bridge, pickups, the pick guard, the knobs and the pots here. And I think the only other thing I have on the list, the last thing, is the output jack itself. The output jack is basically where we plug the bass in, and that's what's called a 1/4 inch jack. And there's our cable that goes into it. It's a 1/4 inch connector, and you hear it make a little noise when we plug it in. But believe it or not, the output jacks can vary greatly in quality. So a lot of times, if you get a really cheap bass, like in the Fender lines, maybe the Squires or something like that, you know, everything's going to be cheaper if you get a $200 bass versus an $800 or $900 bass. And the output jack is actually not as good. So these are parts that oftentimes can fail or not make good contact, and oftentimes if you get a cheaper bass and want to keep it, you'll end up replacing a lot of these parts. That's just a constant thing. You got to decide, do you want to buy a nice bass up front that you're not going to have to replace the parts, or do you want to get a cheaper bass and go back and start, oh, I need better tuners and whatnot. But anyway, hopefully this has helped you out a little bit with just understanding the basics. And if you watch some more of the videos, as we make more videos, we'll be using these terms, and you can decide if you want to keep watching these videos and learn more about the basics of bass guitars. Coming up next, we will have one on the Fender Precision. All right, thanks for tuning in to Jay's Bass Channel, and hope to see you again. And don't forget to subscribe. We are trying to get some subscribers here. Thanks.